Hello, you're watching the Cloudnative Telco Summit, part of our year-round DSP Leaders coverage. I'm Daniels, and in today's panel discussion, we will be looking at cloud-native application development. By using agile development techniques, telcos can rapidly build and scale new services. But how do they package their applications for cloud deployment? How do they monitor performance? And how should they structure their dev teams? Well, to answer these questions, I am pleased to say that joining us on the program are Franz Seiser, who is Executive Tribe Lead, Network Function Cloudification and Disaggregation at Deutsche Telekom. Danielle Royston, CEO and founder of TelcoDR and acting CEO of Totogi. And Diego Lopez, Senior Technology Expert at Telefónica. Hello everyone, good to see you all again, and thanks so much for taking part in our discussion today. Now, for many telcos who have yet to fully embrace cloud native, this is really new territory. Can we discuss what cloud native techniques and best practices are available to these telcos for building and packaging new applications? And Danielle, perhaps we could start by hearing your views on this.
Sure. Guy, all the cloud providers have great tools you can use, as well as services you can buy to help you build out your new application development process. But I think teams struggle at the beginning of the move to the public cloud in designing their initial approach to becoming cloud native. So what I always advise is first decide your target platform. When I talk to telco execs and ask what the target platform is, and they say all or multi-cloud, that's a real big red flag for me. That's like trying to learn how to speak multiple new languages all at the same time. I advise telcos to start with one target platform and build out your development process for that platform. Next, you're moving to a cloud for a reason. Understand the business reasons. Make sure you have a plan to hit your business goals from the beginning. For example, if it's for cost savings, then figure out the technical design to optimize costs, and then make sure you have a plan to hit your targets. Or if it's for speed, design your workloads to increase delivery timeframes. And last, don't build applications with the goal of avoiding hyperscaler lock-in or with the plan to repatriate the workload back on-premise. You'll miss out on a lot of great services that public clouds have to offer if you do this. For example, build your applications and use the tools of that public cloud. Don't build it on-premise with tools only available on-premise, then move it to the public cloud later. You're missing the whole point of why you're using the public cloud. Newsflash, it's for the software, not for the infrastructure. And so I tell telcos, burn the boats. Force everyone to live in the new public cloud reality as soon as possible and show everyone you mean business about this culture change.
Great. Thanks very much, Danielle, for that. And Diego, you've been working with cloud native in the cloud native environment for quite a time now at Telefónica. What's your thoughts on the best practices that are available to other telcos who are not as advanced in their journey as you are?
Well, I would say that there are two things that are very much connected with something that is essential with or natural in the telco environment, that is about collaboration. It's a collaboration among competitors, because otherwise we would not have the telco networks that we are enjoying in these days. And for this, there are two things. One is, and I know I might sound a little bit old-fashioned. It's about standards. Standards are extremely important, in particular in the telco environment, because it's the conventions that allow us to communicate. Think that human language is a standard by itself, and relying on these standards probably without going in to the exaggeration of trying to standardize designs. That this is something that is not the right way, but relying on standards for guaranteeing interoperability in the first point, and in the second point, in helping you learning from the experience of others that are dealing with similar problems, is something that is very important. And second, and very much connected to this, I believe that the recent moves within the telco ecosystem to rely on practical standardization in terms of developing open source software, not necessarily as the last solution, but at least as a clear example of the way to go and the way to gain a better understanding of how things can work. And again, leveraging this collaboration is something that is very important. So go and collaborate, I would say, with your peers.
Thanks, Diego. Can I just pick up on that one with you? Because we had this on yesterday's panel about the importance of following standards. And, there are many standards in this environment that are important. Do you think that message is getting across? Do you think the industry is listening to this?
I hope so. I mean, the point is that, when you put you put a bunch of humans to develop something that is intended to help communication, etc., very often we tend to, overspecify things. So there is a huge number of standards, and it corresponds to the industry and to the ecosystem in general to make a selection of them. What I would say is important that we select them, because people that are standardizing the different groups, because of different reasons, they can be driven somehow by some degree of excessive enthusiasm. But on the other hand, it's important that the telco industry in general, not only operators as well, vendors and the entrepreneurs, play with this, select them, and use those that are really relevant for interoperability, and build a healthy set of standards by, let's say, natural selection.
Great, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Diego. And Franz, what's your thoughts here about the techniques and approaches available to telcos to build out these new applications?
Well, there are tons of tools, best practices, whatever you need available. But I think it needs a little bit of a more distinguished view here. So a telco is consisting of many applications. Some of them can be moved to a public cloud on a relatively low pain, because this is from a characteristic an IT-like application. And as we know, public clouds have been in the first place been designed and built for IT-like applications. That's relatively straightforward. It's a bit more challenging for classical NT workloads, so mobile core, in the most extreme case, of course, ORAN and these type of applications, which are very heavy on packet forwarding and are very strongly subject, especially in Europe, to different levels of regulation, of course, on European level, but also on a per country level. And this, of course, needs to be looked at very carefully, how public cloud structures and architectures may or may not easily comply with this type of regulation. And that's clearly a point that needs a special consideration here. But as I said, for standard IT-like workloads, there is not so much issue here. Everything said here, of course, you need to first understand what is your platform. I agree, you better start with one platform and decide later if you need to add a second or a third. But first learn to walk, then we can talk about running. And also the one thing is to come to a common infrastructure platform, so PaaS layer. The second thing you also need to think about is to come to as much as possible unified management and orchestration and automation layer that sits on top. Because the big benefit or opportunity here is that you can do things much more unified end to end versus classical telco silos like access, transport, and core services.
Yeah, thanks very much, Franz. And Franz, let me continue by asking you our next question, because given the tools available to them, how can a telco achieve the rapid onboarding of apps that we associate with Cloudnative, and also ensure their availability? And, further, how can things like CI/CD pipelines help with this process?
That's the essential piece, because one of the big benefits, as already said, from going cloud native is speed, time to market, and a high level of automation. I sometimes tend to say one of the main reasons why we do cloudification in telco is to much stronger drive automation and get us more efficient. And that's already the answer to the question. You need to build a proper machinery. There is no way on doing manual processes if you want to go to deploy cloud native, because you're not deploying a single container or a single function. Your service is typically composed of multiple functions and microservices, and they all need to be deployed, configured, including networking in a consistent manner. And that in a cloud environment obviously only works properly if you have the right level of automation in. CI/CD clearly being one of the essential tools. So you run from your testing till your full deployment via the CI/CD tools. Have all the proper steps in all the closed loops, automated testing, whatever it takes. Also, then of course telemetry, all that kind of stuff. So it's the key is really, besides figuring out in the first place what is your platform you want to build on, build the right management and orchestration machinery on top that you can manage these type of applications in this highly automated manner.
Great, absolutely. Thanks, Franz. Danielle, just picking up on what Franz said there about not only choosing your platform, but it's the focus on the automation.
Yeah, I think that telcos especially are used to building workloads and testing them end to end before they're deployed out into the wild and really on a network and impacting subscribers. And so it's been more of an attitude of preventing a bug getting into production. And so we kind of keep things on the side and then deploy them once we're really, really sure that they're working. And I think when you start to work with the cloud, you actually start to flip that around, where you build your workloads in a way where you can heal automatically, right? Heal like it's a wound, right? You can automatically recover from issues much more quickly. And so to design your applications in a different way so that when you put something out on that CI/CD pipeline, you either do a canary, right? A small little test to a small little group. And if it's bad, you can pull it back really quickly. Or you can fail over to your last build that was good. And so it's a little bit of a different approach in terms of expecting issues to happen and then building applications in a way where you can recover very quickly. And that's the mindset I see changing when I talk to telcos. I did a podcast with the CTO from giffgaff, Steve McDonald, and he talked about this shift in they're an MVNO, so they're not an MNO, so they're not dealing with network side, but similarly, they have their own applications where they were taking, it would take them a month or 2 months to get a release out. And they've gone from, I think it was like 20 releases a year now to I think it's like thousands of releases a year, because they've sped up their ability to roll out new features and push them out to their subscribers. And so he talks about a mindset shift, and it's a very common language when you talk to people who are really starting to embrace cloud native processes of I got to think about it differently. We interviewed Amy Zarrico from AT&T, who's in charge of security, also on the podcast. She talks about kind of, you sort of expect to fail now, which is kind of weird for a telco to say that, but you just recover so much more quickly that people don't really notice.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. And as we've been saying for a number of years now, it's not just about technology when it comes to cloud native. It's about processes and mindsets and culture as well. Diego, can I move on? Because it's not just about creating and building apps. How do telcos control full lifecycle management of their applications? And in doing so, what are the challenges involved? What are the challenges that they face?
Well, to start with, we had to be aware that, as I said before, telco is very much about collaboration. Is quite I don't know if to call it a mature industry or even an old industry. If you think that, for example, my company is going to become 1 year old, 100 years old. Sorry, not 1 year, 100 years old in the next year, and dealing with the same business, not needing to reinvent ourselves, dealing with telecommunications in general, and that implies that there is the concept of an ecosystem is very important here. When involving and going into this transformation is something that we cannot we cannot afford, and this would be against the very nature of the business, to try to go the way in which, probably whenever you're talking about this kind of transformation, the examples you use about your team that is developing and your team that is doing operations, because you need a clear and fair collaboration with the whole ecosystem, and that includes providers, in many cases even users, when you're developing or validating a new service. And you have to manage to make potentially competing providers to collaborate with you. So you need to have a team that is able to build this ecosystem collaboration and even to collaborate with your competitors as well. The challenge here is how you, or I believe that the challenge is how you transform these tools that are already available, mainly for very tightly coupled teams within the same company or within a very small organizations. I mean, small in the number of components or corporate components that we have, in something that is much wider, that can guarantee the collaboration among competitors. This famous competition that we keep hearing. We have to enable this, and we have to provide the tools for enabling this and the processes that will guarantee that this will happen. And for this, and this is the second aspect that I believe is important, is that we need to measure, and measure. We need to have data. We have to collect evidence. We have to process this data and to evaluate these evidences that we can collect in order to make fast deployments, in order to run experiments in controlled environments, go to a small deployment, see what happens, and then grow slowly or gradually. And again, something that is important is that when we have all these different cloud native components, we can even make adaptive measurements. So we can measure with a coarse grain at a coarse grain level to see how the whole network is behaving, and if we discover something that requires more attention, we can activate or dynamically deploy things. So it's about facilitating the collaboration in the ecosystem first, and second is about measuring and collecting evidence from real data.
Great, thanks very much for that, Diego. And we're going to come back to something you picked up on there about structure and teams a bit later on in our program. But first of all, Danielle, let me bring you into the conversation at this point.
Yeah, sometimes we talk about private cloud and public cloud being equal things. And I fully understand there's going to be, some workloads because of latency or data privacy regulations or country regulations that you need to set up your private cloud. But in doing that, I think leaders need to understand, that literally thousands of decisions, technical decisions that need to be made in terms of selecting the tools, the components, to run your workloads and help you build your applications. And I call it the cloud native zoo. There's literally a picture that from the CNCF that they put together of all of the providers and all of the orchestration, automation, testing, containering systems of the decisions you need to make when you're building your own private cloud. And people kind of just throw it out there like it's no big deal. But I think what you got to understand is those are all independent companies with different roadmaps, with different funding profiles and financial backgrounds, that now there's a burden falls onto the telco or the organization buying these tools in terms of making decisions on which companies we're going to make bets on and how we're going to update all of our tooling and our orchestration and our automation, right? That is a lot of work. That is not simple work. And this is where I tell people all the time, just move as much as you can to the public cloud, because that's all being done for you, right? All of that stuff is just completely removed, and now requires you to trust the hyperscaler and go all in and not sit there and try to build things to be cloud agnostic so you can move it to another cloud or back on-prem. But once you get over this fear of lock-in, right, which I'm like, you're locked in, you don't think you're locked into your private cloud vendors when you pick all of these things? You are. It's an illusion of freedom. But go with as much as you can with the public cloud because it solves so much of, they're making the big bets, they're maintaining the roadmaps, they're advancing those products, and it just simplifies so much for the telco. Yes, you're going to have a private cloud, but I say shrink that down, simplify it as much as you can, because that is a lot of work.
Well, as you say, it's a huge ecosystem out there with many connections and lots of different factors involved. But I want to come on to another aspect of cloud native now, because cloud native comes with something of a just do it and see what happens culture at times. So why should telcos adopt this fail fast approach we hear so much about? How do they manage the process of scaling up or even closing down apps? And Danielle, let me come straight back to you, because earlier in the show you alluded to this about failing fast.
Yes, I did. And so, I mean, typical telco culture doesn't reward failure, right? I said it a few minutes ago in terms of, we end-to-end test and make sure there's no bugs, and that's what we move into production, and not sort of this sort of opposite way of thinking of like, it's going to fail, but how do we recover as quickly as possible, and how do we minimize that impact? And so you got to think about those employees within the telco, right? They're scared to stick their neck out on some sort of new technology or new initiative. They're worried they're going to get burned, or even worse, fired if they fail. And so I advise organizations, especially at the early days, starting with the cloud, is start with small, low impact projects where failure will be much more easily tolerated, right? Avoid this big bang delivery approach where so much is, it's an 18-month project or a 3-year project, right? And no one knows what's going on with the project. Avoid kind of that big bang approach where you don't see any activity and then it's just working overnight. And I tell people, start by building something small on the side, end-to-end test it. It'll be much simpler. Move to the cloud quickly. And then iterate. Add features as you go along, and you're testing it, real users. Don't worry about the extreme edge cases just yet. Kind of put that off as much as you can. Kind of focus on the big middle, the 80%. And your team you start to change that culture within your team because they get used to iterating and improving quickly. They learn about cloud and cloud tooling, and you're building up their tolerance to failing fast and fixing things as they go. And so that's what I avoid. And it's absolutely critical with cloud because things will fail, right? And that's just life. And you learn how to recover. And I think especially in telco, we just have to start to learn how to rewrite the operational runbooks for applications that work this way.
Right, yeah, thanks, Danielle. And we're certainly seeing it from certain telcos, and I'm sure Deutsche Telekom and Telefónica are two of them who are putting this into practice as we speak, and a long way into this journey and this new cultural process. But I'd like to move on, if we don't have any more comments on this particular question, to teams and structure, and asking, what is the best structure for a cloud native telco application team? For example, what's the role of DevOps or platform engineering? Because there always seems to be a new or better way of working. Every week you read the blogs, you read the feeds, there's another process, there's another job title, another function that's a better way of doing things. Franz, this must be extremely challenging to keep abreast of.
Yeah, that's kind of €1,000,000 question. What's the best organization? Actually, I don't think there is a best organization. And what you for sure do not want to do is to confuse all your people by changing the organization every second week or something like that. So it's more, first of all, of course, going cloud and cloud native requires the right skill sets. So you really need to make up your mind, how do you get access to these skills? What can you do in upskilling with your own guys? What do you need to get from the market? And then put them into a flexible organization. So what is clearly gone is that you're working in a team, and you're working in a team for multiple years, if not to say for your lifetime. Things are changing much quicker. Things are developing much quicker. New technologies are coming out. Just remember 5-10 years ago, we have been talking about virtual machines. Now we are talking about containers and microservices. and let's see how much serverless and these kind of things will have an impact also on us and on telcos. So technology is developing, and what you need to do is to set up the organization in a way that you can adapt to these kind of developments, put people together in the right setting. If you now call it DevOps or IntOps, because some people, of course, tell you, well, we are not developing software, we are only integrating software. So you can have nice discussions about that one. Is that really relevant? You can have your doubts, but key is really have the ability to put people dynamically on these topics, make sure they are developing their skills in a proper way. They have enough time to develop skills, because that's not coming overnight. And then I think there's also a culture part, and I think slightly different setups are required in different parts of the network, because sometimes you purchase everything from external suppliers, sometimes also own code development is involved, and of course you need to reflect that in your organizational setup as well.
Thank you, Franz. So learn skills as a priority, and also make sure you're agile and you've got a team structure that can move and be flexible as and when required. Well, we're going to leave IntOps maybe until next year, but we've a quick plug, because tomorrow we've got a panel on platform engineering, because we want to get to the bottom of what that's all about. But for now, Diego, let's come across to you to hear your thoughts on teams and structure.
Yeah, well, first of all, is thinking that this is this saying that goes like the perfect is the enemy of the good, and I believe that this is as Franz said, this is about being flexible and keeping a mindset that allows you to adapt and not to just simply follow what is, well, let's say the last organizational fashion in this matter, and try to and do the same that we're talking about services and the like. I mean, it's being able to try and make if this is the case, a fast fail of the or a particular organization style. When talking about the skill sets, again, and this is something that I have been insisting since we started this, everything around softwareization and network transformation, and then Cloudnative, etc. Something that I do believe is that inside telcos there is a lot of skills and talent that, because of the nature of the industry and because how we have been structured and are still structured, has been this kind of skills have not been necessarily really incorporated in the processes. It's not only about retraining people; it's about taking advantage of the young people that we are incorporating, or even the veterans that have been fighting with operations, etc., are reinventing mechanisms to save some time. And there is a lot of skills that can be not only, I mean, for sure, retrain and repurpose, but as well, there is a lot of capacity for automation, for clear enhancements, and probably the example, taking advantage that these days in Japan, as you know, is about, I don't know those of you, but probably many of the in the audience would remember these ideas about the quality circles in the Japanese industry and incorporating suggestions from the employees, etc. Taking advantage of these, let's say, hidden talent that we have would be extremely important as well. The second thing that I believe is important is that, let me say, it's about not falling to the very last fashionable thing that probably is not happening or not applicable or totally applicable to the telco environment. And when thinking about the discussions we were going to have here, something that came to my mind is probably you have heard about this book on project management that was called The Mythical Man Months some time ago. That was about that. Well, it was about that counting is right, that you count the effort that is required for something in person month or man month. This was they were called in the past. But it's not that you doubling your workforce, you are dividing by 2 the time that is required for doing so. And recently, some time ago, I had the impression that there was some kind of mythical virtual function. It was whatever the problem, just telling that you were going to virtualize the functionality, it was enough. Right now, we are a little bit, I would say, suffering a fever of the mythical microservice. People keep obsessed about dividing too much the workloads, and probably something that in some cases a good stateful application can make sense. And this is something that we should not forget, that we have to be flexible in the mindset and flexible in how we organize the teams.
Yeah, thanks very much, Diego. And as you correctly said there, and nicely said, there's a lot of hidden talent within telcos that needs to come out, and it can be very beneficial. Danielle, let me come across to you, because this will be our final comment for this particular panel.
Yeah, and especially, when you're moving things to the public cloud, and like I said in my first answer on the first question about really understanding the business goals of why you're doing this, right? I mean, sure, the technology is great, but I mean, it's a lot of effort to retool your entire organization to be cloud native. And why are you doing this? And a big reason people are motivated to make such a massive change in their telco, which not only is, technical change, but also a cultural change, is around cost savings. And I don't really hear people talking about on DevOps and platform engineering yet at this point within telco. I don't hear people talking about their plan to continuously cost optimize that cloud spend that's happening in the public cloud. We're working at my company, Totogi, we're working with a tier one in India and Africa, right? Where, this is their big fear of like, once we love it. We love the public cloud. We love what it can do for us. We know the speed, the cost savings, but we're afraid of cost sprawl. How do we control that? So a big part of this is on your DevOps and platform engineering team. I recommend to leave room in your budget to not only hire people who understand, as you're making technical decisions, the financial implication of using a particular database over another one, or thinking through our storage strategy, because the public cloud has everything from super hot and expensive, readily available instantly, all the way to Glacier at AWS. It's very cold storage, which might take 24 hours or 48 hours to access a particular record. And accordingly, there's different price points for all the different storage elements. There's great SaaS tools out there in the market like CloudFix. TelcoDR has a great partnership with them that work with you to optimize your spend, and you got to start to think through the cost implications of the engineering decisions that you're making when you start to use the public cloud. And so we've seen telcos reduce their spend on compute at AWS by as much as 40%, which is crazy. It's a crazy number, but is true. And so by doing this, right, there's constant changes with public cloud pricing and technology. You're evaluating which ones should we use. Should we move to it? Should we adopt this new feature? Should we move to the new Graviton chip and get the 40% price performance improvement on our workloads and reduce our compute spend? This is like a whole new way of thinking. And you got to do it from the beginning. You got to do it continuously. And if you do it really great, your cloud costs will come down every year. And it frees up budget to invest in cool things like generative AI. Like the mythical man month that book needs to be completely rewritten for the man month who uses excellent prompts with generative AI, because now work is taking, it's not half, it's, 10% of the time, right? So, I mean, the world is changing very rapidly. For telco, we got to get onto cloud, and we got to get onto the AI train. And I'm sure you guys will soon have a summit around using generative AI in the telco. I can't wait to be a part of that.
Yep, thanks, Danielle. Thanks for the plug, because that's coming up next month. So don't go too far away. You'll be able to see our AI native telco summit on TelecomTV next month. But going back to your point there, I guess this is another aspect of the of team structure with Cloudnative, because this introduces FinOps to the equation. So we've got a whole range of jobs and specialist functions there that come out with Cloudnative. Right, we must leave it there. I'm sure we will continue this debate during our live audience Q&A show that's coming up later. For now, though, thank you all for taking part in our discussion. And if you are watching this on day 2 of our Cloud Native Telco Summit, then please send us your questions and we'll answer them in our live Q&A show. And that's coming up very soon. And don't forget to view the other panel discussions and keynote interviews in this year's summit. Here is the agenda for today, and the full schedule of programs and speakers can be found on the Cloud Native Telco Summit section of the TelecomTV website. If you haven't yet done so, please download our exclusive Cloud Native research report from my colleague Ray Lemaitre. For now, though, thanks for watching and goodbye.